Hi everyone. Welcome to the pod. It has been, I don't know, it feels like a hot minute to me since I put out content and probably into the interwebs world. Um, it probably doesn't feel that long. Especially if you don't listen to like my pod or engage in my content like on a continuous basis. But I feel like that's probably how it should be, especially the way my business, the spirit of my business. I found out her name recently. I asked her name so I could just call her. Spirit of my business gets long after a while, and I was like, "Hey, what's your name?" And she just shared with me Serena during, I think it was during a morning journal or something like that. So yeah, I haven't been on in a while because for like since before January, I've been putting out content more recently through Substack and the podcast. And as my journey has been unfolding, it's been following the rhythms of nature, the rhythm of my body, the seasons of my body, and your body has seasons. Everyone's bodies have seasons, but because I'm a woman, I can speak to that experience instead. I hear men have seasons in their bodily experience, but I can't I can't speak to that. And and if there's a man out there that could speak to that, I would love to talk to you. I am so curious what that's supposed to mean because in our in the old ways of being, in the old um, ways that we're stepping out of as a collective, the patriarchal society, we're every day we're turned on, and on the weekends we're turned off. During the week we're working, and on Saturday and Sunday we're playing, hopefully. Playing, going on a weekend trip, resting. In the evenings during the week, we're taking a break and going back to work in the morning. And that's how the patriarchal, hypermasculine society, hypermasculine energy society that our society had us running as, that's how it was operating. We all know that. But what are we moving towards instead if we're not doing that anymore? If we're not running on the 9 to 5 that burns our bodies out. And when we go back, what we're coming back to, I've noticed, is listening to how our bodies want to experience this world instead. Our bodies have all the answers, or lots of clues to your answers, and even the soul connections to our higher selves and other aspects of us. And so, that being said, I don't even, part of me is like, did I even say anything? Like, I feel like I said a bunch of garbage, but if that resonates with you, awesome. Um, like, did I make a concrete like sentence? I don't know. That's what came out of me. But to my point, right now, after last week, I had been putting lots of content, or not last week, but since January, I've been putting out lots of content. And even the moments where my body feels like it needs rest, I was still able to write. I was able to put out content in the form of writing, so I'll show up that way. And that was my consistency. I would show up through that, or consistency did look like rest because I need to rest to continue to create and produce. And if I don't rest, I come to a burning halt on everything and how my business wants to manifest through me. So last week I took a break from writing on Substack. I was like, I'm not writing this week. I really feel the need to focus on these two workshops. I had two workshops um like scheduled right like one day after the other, and we had a good turnout. Renee and I put a workshop together for Tarot and Oracle to learn how to play with Tarot and Oracle together as a group. We did a short history and we learned how to use those divination tools together, whatever decks people had on hand, which was a lot of fun because a lot of people out there, they're like, ooh, I want to buy this thing. It looks really pretty, but nobody ever teaches us how to use it. I kind of learned along my way or use my intuition as to how do I want to use the decks. And without guidance, it's like a lot of inner trust and how, like, is this card like resonating with me? Am I pulling the right card? I don't know what I'm doing, so you don't even start at all. And that was lovely. We had 11 people come out, and then we sent out the replay. So the replay is forever stored on Substack, and I just started YouTube. That happened. And then and then I had a group workshop for another creator's business program. Business, I was advertising it actually on Substack, so it was a business program for Mystics by Xenia at Myths of Creation on Instagram. I deeply thankful and appreciate her for the invitation, and we didn't really know each other when she invited me, but I found it very inspiring when someone chooses to trust that I will show up the way that Spirit wants this business to come together, or her program to come together. And I thought that was beautiful. I was like, wow, she like doesn't know me from a hole in the wall, and she let me um, lead a quantum hypnosis group um, group facilitate. I'm sorry, I'm losing my facilitate a group of quantum hypnosis. Like we're almost essentially strangers. I just facilitated for her at one point, and then she graciously opened me up to her community, which was so beautiful. And we had the most beautiful experience. And I mean, I think some people who might listen to this and did not have a beautiful experience, that's just how the practice is. Sometimes when we step into new things, um, it's not how it turned like we wanted it to turn out or expect it to turn out. What our minds lead us to believe it should be, instead of letting it be how it wants to be. And that comes back to honoring the rhythms of the body and nature. And right now it's February. February. It's actually the end of February. Today's the 27th. As I'm recording this on a pod walk around the neighborhood again. And like today, I'm walking around. I'm like wide awake. I was like, I'm just gonna go for a walk. I'm just gonna do it. I'm not gonna even bother like reading or doing my morning journal. I really like it's becoming a strong message that I just need to get into a movement practice first thing in the morning. So I'm on my walk and I felt called to record. And as I was approaching the park, I was like, wow, it's so foggy and beautiful. I love morning fog. And it's not even cold. It's like, which is odd because when I look at it, my mind's programming or belief on the situation is that when it's foggy, it's cold. It's kind of warm. I didn't know you could have warm, foggy weather. And that's just how nature wanted to manifest this morning, wanted to be in the physical world. And that's what practice looks like. And because we are nature, how does the practice want to show up through us? And I had to tell some of the people who didn't experience anything through their quantum hypnosis. I was like, you know what? In the first year of meditation, I always fell asleep, in group too, in group practice, in solo practice. I always fell asleep. I think up until that astral projection story, up until that moment, I don't, like a few episodes ago, I shared an astral projection story, I believe. I think I did. I don't remember. It's like so many things are happening all the time. Um, I've never meditated past 15 minutes. And then once I allowed myself to go deeper and just trust, like, okay, it feels like I should just go longer and go more deeply into this meditation. I left my body and started floating around in my room. Like physically, like I could physically, viscerally feel my astral body leave. It was almost like oh yeah, now I remember I did share the story, but it felt like my astral body was peeling away from my physical body. Like it was a visceral feeling. I could feel it. I was conscious when it happened. And I was floating, like spinning and floating around in the top of my room. And that's what happens when you get curious to move forward. And when you listen to your body and what it needs. And to that note, I was talking to my friend John the other day, and we were talking about limiting beliefs. And everybody's going through a particularly hard time, challenging time, especially in the collective. Everybody's going through something in their personal lives. And we got to talk again because he was dealing with his life, and I was dealing with mine. And usually we like chat like all the time. And he was talking about how limiting beliefs are a boundary for yourself. And not necessarily that, and I was just like, oh, that's so interesting. Because when I think about limiting beliefs, my spiritual baby self of 4 years ago, because I um, awakened so recently compared to a lot of people, but it really feels like lifetimes ago at this point, 4 years ago, through all this spiritual growth, is that I used to think like, oh, fuck limiting beliefs. They just hold us down, blah, blah, blah. I was like very go-getter, very in the rebel energy. Like nobody could tell me what to do, that kind of energy. And then when he said that, I was like, you know what? When I talk to my clients, I don't engage in them that way. I don't believe in their limiting beliefs, the stories that our minds tell us. But I do believe that their limiting beliefs are true for a reason, and that when something feels particularly scary in their bodies, like the fear comes first and then the stories come true. And when that happens with them, I'm just like, you know what? Let's take it a step back. It feels really challenging right now. What do you feel like? Because at the end of a coaching session, we always use action. Like we create an action so that when we step towards whatever we're trying to overcome, we're teaching our bodies step by step that it is safe to move in this direction. And often the mind will make it a bigger task than it needs to be. It's just our programming. It's whatever. It's just our programming. And something I had to understand last year is that, you know what? This is realistically, this is where I am. Why does my mind have to think I'm supposed to be there already? And that's like a part of just the human experience. Especially when you are like in the astral realms or the spiritual or etheric place, your mind can see where you're going. Your body can your body can your mind's eye can see where you're going. Your body feels where you're going. And then you open your eyes and you're like, wait a second, this is my current reality. And that's like the thing about the ego though. It's a very tricky thing to work with. I was having a conversation with another person while we were we were having a mushroom moment, and he was asking me this question, and I was like, he was asking me, what is an ego? And I was like, holy fuck. And like knee deep in a mushroom trip, I was like, I don't know how to fucking answer that question. And like with all my other podcast episodes, I start with an idea. This is very much like my writing process. I start with a word or an idea, and then I just start writing, and whatever comes out is what's meant to come out. That's like nature. And sometimes I write on the topic that inspired me to start writing comes out, and sometimes it's something completely different. And then I would have to title it differently, because I'll start with a title in mind, but I won't force myself to write on the title. I'll just let the words come through in whatever message that spirit wants me to convey through written word come through. I'm starting to trust that this is my same process with speaking on the podcast, speaking with people. And I started with the ego. Like, I'm going to talk about the ego, even though I'm like, I don't know that I exactly have the words for it. And I actually had to Google it real quick just to give myself like a little context and understanding. From my, like, cause words is like, it's a part of my, if you're familiar with astrology, I have a Chiron and Gemini placement. And if you're not familiar with what that placement means, I have that placement in my birth chart, my natal chart, my astrological birth chart. So if you like type in your birth date location, um, birth location, birth time in a chart, you're the online, like sub on any random astrology um, website, it'll populate a birth chart. Everybody has a Chiron placement, but whether or not your sign, the sign it sits in, is in Gemini or any other of the other 11 signs of astrology, it's so individual. Astrology is so vast. So my Chiron is the wounded healer, and my Chiron is in Gemini. What does this mean? Chiron, the wounded healer, it's how we're a wound, a lifetime wound that we're healing through in our lives. And it's not that we're struggling the whole time. It's just a challenge that we'll experience through our lives. If we choose to face it, it can be easier each and every time we go through it. And mine is about learning to be valued for the thoughts and ideas that I have and showing up in like communications or the written word, which is crazy and hilarious at the same time because old me would have been like, fuck off. I am not speaking in front of people, let alone me facilitating a quantum hypnosis session that I last minute was like, hey, you guys want Reiki too? Which was received well. Like everybody's like, yes, yes. Well, most of everybody. I'm not sure. I couldn't tell if everybody was raising their hands, but majority of people were raising their hands, which was so cool. And yeah, in front of 19 people. That's my biggest group to date, and which is so cool. And at the same time, I realize when I'm reading now back to the spiritual ego is, well, let me finish my thought on Chiron and Gemini before my ADHD brain like gets lost again. It's my wounds with communications, like knowing that what I have to say has worth. Even just talking at all. Like when I was a kid, I just struggled with communicating with people. Period. Like and like putting thoughts together and like it was so easy to see someone's like confused face or like whatever expression on their face and be like, "Oh my God, I said something stupid," or and then like the writing thing, like I never thought of myself as a writer. Apparently, that's a part of my path. I mean, I write a Substack now. It's been a year, which is crazy, and I show up on a podcast. And not that if you have a Chiron and Gemini placement that you would be doing these things. It'll show up. It'll manifest in different ways if you choose to heal through it. Of course, choice is a big piece of it. And now back to the ego. So what is the ego? Ego is from the Google search and AI popped up. And let me look at it real quick so I can recite it to you guys. Okay, I got it pulled up. And it says the ego mind refers to the part of your consciousness that identifies with your personal identity, beliefs, and desires. Essentially, the self, quote unquote, self that thinks, quote unquote, I am this, and is often seen as a barrier to deep spiritual understanding and connection, as it focuses on separation and self-centeredness rather than unity and oneness with everything else. And that's an interesting string of words. And I see words now that I'm healing through my creativity and my communications and writing and speaking and being seen, stuff that's all intertwined and entangled, is that words are just a way to convey a message. I had different relationships with words as I've been healing through all of this. I used to think, like, I hate words, like, labels don't make sense, like, I'm a, like, multifaceted human being. Like, words just, like, are so limiting, which, granted, they are, but now it's just, like, words just convey an idea or message that I know is true in my body. It might not ever make sense to anyone else because they're so limiting to how we want to convey an idea or deep knowing. Which is really funny that I'm talking about this because I facilitated a quantum hypnosis for a client the other day, and she recalled a lifetime as a caveman. This was such a phenomenal hypnosis experience, and eventually I'm gonna ask her to share it whenever she's done. Like, whenever I'm ready to intuitively call to ask her, and whenever she feels like, oh, okay, it's a yes, like, sure, let's do it. And she recalled a lifetime as a caveman, a man. And this was a pre-verbal experience, and it was insanely cool. Like, wow, this was how humans were and existed before, like, modern society, and they just were communing with nature. It coexisted with the planet and just used resources that were there. They didn't have to go hunt they didn't have to, well, I mean, they did hunt, but, like, necessarily have to search high and low for it. They didn't need Amazon to, like, send a package from one continent to the next to create this meal. They, like, used what they had on hand. And that's something that I've been learning through my creativity lately, is learning how to use the resources that I have now. It's, like, so silly that we think that we have to use, like, we always have to buy something. We always need money to access this thing that we want to create, instead of using our creative juices to see how this wants to come through us, like everything else. Like, how can I put this together with the resources that Spirit granted me? And I think I said this in a earlier podcast too. It's like, we already have a lot of shit. We just don't realize it. Like, it's all in our homes. Like, where did all our money go? We spent it all. We have a lot of things in our house we don't realize. If we just, like, took the time to, like, sift through our immediate resources, like, hidden in our closets and stuff like that. So, back to that paragraph, and let me say it again because I got onto another side tangent with thoughts and my ADHD brain. So, okay. The ego mind refers to the part of your consciousness that identifies with your personal identity, beliefs, and desires. Essentially, the self that thinks, I am this, and is often seen as a barrier to deeper spiritual understanding and connection, as it focuses on separation and self-centeredness rather than unity and oneness with everything else, which is, everything about this statement is so crazy. The part of your consciousness that identifies with personal identity, beliefs, and desires. So I'm going to start with that piece. And in my journey through my human design chart, the way I'm designed to interact or operate in this existence, this incarnation, this lifetime, is that I have an emotional authority, and I'm meant to engage in the world or operate or make decisions through neutrality, a neutral emotional place. Because if I act on a no, it might actually be a yes if I'm in a neutral state. If I act on a yes on something I was so excited by, it might actually be a no in the long run. Like, over time, I'll be like, oh, it excited me in the moment, but actually, no, I'm really not into this. And I want to say too, this is a part of the ego that, like, everybody talks about how ego is so bad, and that's the part where ego shows up in limiting beliefs, and that's the ego I'm more familiar with. But now I'm like, and because actually, I'm having a real life inspiration right now. I mean, in the moment inspiration, because you guys know I engage in parts work. There's many different parts of me that shows up that I engage with in my thought processes in my daily. There's like my inner child, my inner teen. I have the inner wizard. I have and my spirit of my business is an any person too, like a part of me that shows up through me. Because she comes through like an inward. She comes from a inward experience, inner connection. She's a part of me too. And all the other facets of me, I'm like blanking on the rest of them. But I do want to say, yeah, the limiting beliefs, because we are back to the part where it says unity and oneness. We are infinite spiritual consciousnesses within our physical being. So limitation is not necessarily true. And then on the other side of the coin, we do live in a physical world, and we do have human physical limitations. So, and that's a lot of the interesting things you'll notice in spirituality. Like, you'll have this particular belief, but it doesn't make sense with your experience. They just both exist. It's an and end experience. This and experience. And desire is not necessarily bad. I like to say, in our physical spaces, if it weren't for our desires, what we want to come to fruition, like, say we want a better world through our businesses, it wouldn't happen if we didn't have the desire to do it. And I think what this paragraph is trying to portray is our attachments to certain outcomes, instead of letting nature, spirit manifest the way it wants to manifest through us, and helping us grow and release our attachments to what our mind thinks what our mind thinks it should be, instead of listening to our hearts that are connected to our infinite possibilities. Like, what could this look like instead when we use our hearts instead? And the couple times that you guys noticed me get really like lit up and excited, I like listened to that. I was like paying attention as I was speaking to you all. I was listening to that, like feeling it in my body, and I was like, huh, I'm really excited that I like overcome this really challenging thing. Like, no, and you know what? It wasn't even challenging. That's another thing of my programming. When I get into new spaces, I was like, my old self would definitely see that as challenging, but as I moved through it, I felt deeply held, and I was like, I'm safe to do this new thing. And it wasn't challenging at all, which was like a beautiful experience to know that spirit, when you listen to your intuitive messages on a daily, like how spirit is building you up to become the person that can do this thing or show up in a different way for this bigger vision, but you don't know how you're going to get there or how you're going to look like to be there. Spirit's always building you up to that point when you listen to your intuition and your messages and acting on them on the daily. That's like a big clue. Like, we have a lots of wants and desires and goals, and then we go through the journey of, well, I haven't taken action on it, and nothing physical in this world happens without our participation in it. And that doesn't mean forcing it to happen either. Spirit, like, there's a lot of things that happens behind this blah. Let me, okay, behind the scenes. Oh, funny. I was like, can I talk today? Why was that so hard to say? And when I just said that part, an old part of me would have been like, oh my god, you like fucked up, you hiccuped, you didn't say that right, you sound like a goofball, or and my thoughts before it was not that kind. So I'm just giving you the light PG version of what my thoughts would say to me. And I'm just like, I listened, and I was like, as I said all those things, I was like, huh, I don't have a rise in my body right now. I can actually just joke and like be honest about my experience and not feel any kind of way about it. And that's me and I've like something I've healed through, having a safe and even nervous system, and what do I want to say about this? An even regulated nervous system, and that's something that I've been coming to realization, is that abundance and prosperity isn't necessarily money, especially at these times with all the crazy shit that's happening out in the world. And right when I said crazy shit that was happening in the world, I felt a tiny rise in my body, like super tiny, minute. And I was like, well, that's interesting that that's there. But there's nothing wrong with fear. either. Like, I don't believe in fear if you're stepping into new versions of yourself, and then there's a fear in your body that keeps you safe, and then there's the um, keeps you safe when, like, say your intuition's like, hey, don't go that way. Here's a little fear because something like you might hurt yourself, kind of thing. That's a way that fear can show up in your body. And back to the back to the part back to the ego mind, the section of that paragraph that says I am this, and the self-centered part of ego is that you are not, in the spiritual sense, you are not this when you are connected to, you are a piece of source, God, universe, spirit. You're a fraction or fractal fragment of universal consciousness. The idea behind it is that you are universe, God, manifested in the physical to have a physical experience in this world. You incarnated into this lifetime. Your soul self is like a fragment of universal consciousness, which is like this infinite thing that we're connected to, that we're all connected to in our insides. So how can you be a particular thing when you are that? A part of universe, spirit, God. And then at the same time, we are in this duality experience. I am a part of spirit, God, universe. I also am this human with this slew of identifications. I am Filipino American. I am a female. I am 40 years old. I am um uh what else? How else am I describing myself? I'm a quantum hypnotist. I used to be a nurse. But how? And I was reading Eckhart Tolle recently, and it was like, how can you be things that are outside of you? How are you these things that are outside of you? When you were born, you weren't a nurse. So how could you be a nurse? You were just a human being, a human that is being. So, and the book is The Power of Now, if you guys are interested in reading it. It's a dense read, but I found that, like, when I came across the book for the first time, it was like 2017, 2018, and I didn't know what the fuck it was saying. Like, somebody showed it to me, like, um, uh, made a copy of one of the pages, like, in, like, Oracle fashion, like, flip to a page, like, pick a number, okay, pick a number between this and this, and okay, that number, and then they made a copy of that page, and I still have that piece of paper with me, which is crazy, and that page still gives me messages, but, like, from time to time, whenever I read it, because we're always changing, so we receive information differently, and just lands differently when we have more experiences, connect to new people, and just let time pass. And so that's another part of it. We both have an identity. We don't at the same time. In the deepest spiritual enlightened space, we are nothing and everything at the same time. which is crazy. When you want to manifest something, you're like, how is that a thing? But I wouldn't use your mind to think. It's like, and Eckhart Tolle says this a lot in the book, if you're using your mind to figure it out, you're not doing it right. Like, it is just a universal truth that just is. Like, we cannot use the mind to make sense of it because with our limited human understanding and our current conscious understanding, it doesn't make sense with the definitions we currently have. And I don't know that we're ever meant to define it on logical human terms. And let me go to the last part of that passage. It says, the ego mind focuses on separation and self-centeredness rather than unity and oneness with everything else. And that comes back to what comes to mind on this part is how we're not meant to lead our lives with our ego minds, our minds, our logical minds. And granted, this is like how we got here in the first place collectively. Not that as like a shame thing, like, oh, if we weren't this way, we wouldn't have been here at all. Collectively, we needed to go through a very challenging time to know that we are meant to lead with our hearts instead. Like, look where our logical minds got us. We stepped in, like, all the human atrocities that happen around the world, and it needed to come to the surface, it needed to come to light. This is all things that happened quietly. We were sheltered away from the information, like the human rights violations that happen to people all around the world. When we are human on this earth, nature takes care of us. It's plentiful and resourceful, and we choose to. And we all collectively came into a society that believes we have to use money to breathe, to basically live, which still makes me crazy in my insides. Like, this is insanity. Like, we're the only creatures on this planet that needs money to live. Technically, we don't. Technically, we don't need money at all. It's really, I'm going to say it because I do believe it. Money is like a made up thing. Humans made up money. It's something that was just assigned value from someone back in the day, whoever this person is. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. But that being said, it's the part of a mind that creates separation. And because I don't think we're meant to step into spaces where we're headed as a collective, we're not meant to live in our logical minds, because our logical minds will have us separate, and each other causes division and hatred and fighting and anger. And instead of just that, knowing in our insides that we all came from a place of love, and that's all we're ever searching for, is that connection back to our inner love. So I'll leave that. I'll leave this episode there. I have no workshops planned. I've just been in a restful state of being in this last couple weeks. I really needed it. My body's like, okay, we're taking a break. I'm on my period now too, so I was just like, yep, it's very on time for after workshops experience. I'm very grateful to be able to rest when I haven't been able to rest in like 14 years. And you guys, please message me if you guys ever want to, like, yeah, you guys have any burning questions, or we can just have a conversation. I try my best to answer questions, and sometimes I just don't have the answers because you know what? I I know what my body knows, and my mind, I don't have the words for it. But we can talk. We can chat. The email is in the show notes. You guys can reach me through Substack. I live there a lot now. I do have TikTok still. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Thank you. Bye bye.